Derek, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Dude, 100%. 100%. We were connecting the other day through an introduction through our mutual friend, Mr. Randy Molland, who's made tons of intros on the show at this point. And dude, the conversation was awesome. We had to record one, especially, you just had a big book launch. So I'm excited to kind of talk about that. But dude, before we dive into any of that, give us the spark notes for people that don't know you and your story, who you are, where you're coming from, what are you doing now?
Cool. My name is Derek Strokon. I live up in a little small resort town of about 1,400 people. So I'm smack dab in the middle of a forest, which is really wicked, but being able to establish a business remotely has been wild. So we left the city and we moved into a resort town because I've got internet connection up here and I can continue to do what I was doing. And that's really inspired me to make some pretty significant shifts in my life. So I left a corporate job that I'd been in almost 16 years last January, started my own consulting company last January, started a second company this January, starting a third company right now. I've been able to put out 2 books and do a TEDx in the last year and a half. So it's been super busy, just this evolution, this human evolution of taking the journey bigger, playing on a bigger stage than I was playing before and being inspired to actually figure out how to do it on my own.
What were you doing in corporate?
I worked for a big insurance company. So multinational insurance investment company. Probably, I joke that I kind of had the full bingo card on that one, that I did every role. I was a financial advisor. I was a sales manager. I sold mutual funds for a couple of years. I went and took one of our worst performing branches and brought that from 86 in the country up to 7th within 2 years.
Wow.
And then moved into the coaching space and really found a passion for helping people make significant change in their business. And I found by being able to get out of the corporate world where I didn't have to do all of the webinars and the corporate meetings and the quarterly this and the all of the stuff that distracted me from helping somebody grow their business. So I took a big leap last January and made the shift. So it's been great. It's been a year and a half. So we're still afloat, which is nice.
That's awesome. I'm really curious about that transition because you'd been at the company for 16 years. I'd imagine that there was some sort of like vision that you had for your stay at that company. Like that's a very decent tenure, but you also, you were taking a leap later on in life, which I think takes a lot of audacity.
Yeah.
Like for context, I left my last company I spent like 5 years at. But when I left, I had no responsibility, I feel like it was the time for me to do it because I was single. I had no family, no kids, no responsibilities other than my bills, like rent, electricity, and my personal development that I was funding. So what did life look like for you as you took that leap? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I probably did it, I guess on paper, did it at the wrong time, but emotionally did it exactly at the right time. So big mortgage, 2 young kids that are going through school that are hungry and they're eating us out of house and home.
Yeah.
My wife was staying at home at the time. So I was the sole income earner, 44 years old, 2 young kids and a big mortgage. And it was the focus on being present with my children that was the big shift. We moved to this resort town on purpose so that we could spend more time. We could change our life. I don't, Tim Ferriss talks about it in the 4-Hour Work Week, and he talks about living life as a series of mini retirements. And rather than waiting till we were 65 to enjoy our life, rather than waiting till that, the go, the slow go and the no-go years to actually be able to enjoy our life, I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And I ended up having a challenge with my boss at the time, just about coordinating and prioritizing my time with my children. And that was the big pivotal moment.
Yeah.
And, they were 8 and 10 at the time, and they still want to spend time with dad. And I've probably got 4 more years of that, you know, until they go off on their own, and right, they reject their parents and they become smarter than I am in their minds. So I really wanted to make sure that I was capitalizing on and enjoying that time of my life. And it didn't fit into a corporate mold anymore. And realizing that the skill set I had from the coaching background, from the development side, from implementing systems and processes, the creative entrepreneur mindset that I think I'd let slide. Right. I lived in between the four dots, but it's not where my strength is. That's not where my superpower is. Right. And so to try and fit inside a mold that wasn't suited for me anymore. And not to say, like, I appreciated the 16 years I had with that company. I always thought I'd be, one of the old white guys with their picture in the grand hall at head office, and realizing that that's not what life's about. Life's about being able to ski with my kids. Life's about being able to go for a walk with my wife at lunchtime. That was the pivotal moment where we just decided to shift. And that has really been a huge motivator for me to think about, why don't we change when things are good? Why do we wait till we hit the wall at 500 miles an hour? Because my shift didn't happen. I didn't need to make the shift, but we chose to make that shift. Yet so many people wait till they hit the wall. They wait till the cancer diagnosis. They wait till a spouse dies. They wait till, disaster strikes. And it really got me very curious about studying this addiction to chaos and crisis that we have as humans. And why don't we make the shift? And that's really been my biggest passion over the last year and a half, is trying to solve that problem.
That's super interesting, because I'm glad you went there, because my question was going to be, do you think that you had that realization soon enough, or was there regret about having it later on? And in context, I'm fascinated. Like, I'm not at that stage of life yet. My wife and I don't have children. We're building businesses right now. We plan to, but like, God willing, right? Like, we'd love to do that, but we don't have that yet. And I think people misunderstand why I invest so heavily in masterminds. I talk about this fairly frequently. People think that it's about growing the business, which is great, and that stuff happens. But really, it's about surrounding myself with people who are doing life at the next level, and they're doing it how I want to do it. So one thing that I'm really, really fascinated by and absolutely petrified of, like, my number one fear in the world, is missing out on the big things, because I was focused on the little things that at the time I thought were the big things. And with that context in mind, how did you feel about the timeline of having that realization? Like, was there any regret for having it too late, or do you feel like you caught it? Like, did you make the decision that things were good?
I think I definitely was further down the line that, looking back, would have I done it sooner? Now, knowing what I know, I would have done it sooner. But looking at where I was emotionally, where I was financially, where I was being prepared to actually take a leap and to make that big move into self-employment, to go from, a very well-paying corporate job to zero guaranteed income. Would have I done it sooner? Probably. Should have I done it sooner? I don't think so. I think this timing has worked out to be very, it was that stage of life. It was the realizing. I think I wouldn't have done it before, because my kids were just kids. They ran around, they did their own thing. But now we have this great relationship where we can actually go do the same thing. My son and I go mountain biking, every day if we can, or every other day we get out on our mountain bikes. So we're now at that stage where we're doing those father-son things together, to sit and do art with my daughter, and to realize that these are the precious years that I'm not going to have the chance to get back. And how many of us are stuck in that rut, exactly where I was, where we're chasing the corporate dream, where we're entrapped in hero culture, where we're trying to prove ourselves. It's, whoever shows up earliest and stays the latest is the one who gets the promotion. That mentality and that mindset, and it came from a few different places. It came from Joseph Campbell and his hero's journey, that he was good friends with George Lucas when Lucas was writing Star Wars. And George Lucas used this hero's journey formula that we all praise, and it's an incredibly impactful journey and model. But he used that to write Star Wars, right? So this is, normal dude, normal gal, faces a crisis, falls and hits rock bottom, goes through this painful evolution, becomes the hero, and then goes and shares what they learned, their life lessons, with the rest of the world. That has become so ingrained in our society that we've become trapped in that kind of a mindset and that kind of a mentality that, we don't change until we have the crisis. We rely on chaos. And the weird thing about chaos is that as a human, in our minds, we try and put order to that. But chaos is just chaos. There is no order, right? So this false sense of trying to put order to things, the comments about, everything happens for a reason. I don't believe it. I think everything just happens. I was coaching a client, and she had this big wall cut out, saying on her back wall, and it said, "You are exactly where you need to be right now." And I said, "Do you have any painter's tape or duct tape?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Can you go cover up the need to be for me?" So that we change the saying to you're exactly where you are. Yeah. Right. This isn't about you're exactly where you need to be. That language permeates so deep in our society. And those are the things that let us off the hook for not achieving the great things that we want to accomplish in our lives. Right. I can let myself off the hook to go, I'm exactly where I need to be. Well, no, you're not. You're just exactly where you are. So if we can live with that mindset, it gives us the inspiration to make significant change.
I totally get that part. So is your stance that things don't happen exactly as they're supposed to, or things don't always work out how they're supposed to? Things just happen, and then the whole as they're supposed to part, that's just the meaning that we assign things?
Yeah, because it's what we do with the happen.
Yeah,
that ends up determining what our result is. But when we relinquish the control and the power that we have to make change to a saying like everything happens for a reason, or you are exactly where you need to be right now. When we give up that control, we give up the ability to make the shift and the change. And I think, right, yeah. Eminem's song, Lose Yourself, I think it's the most streamed song in the world ever. But that one line, he says, if you had one shot or one opportunity to capture everything you ever wanted, would you capture it or would you let it slip? And we believe this mentality that opportunity is fleeting, that opportunity comes and it passes and it's right in front of you, and then it goes and it's gone. But it's not true. Opportunity recreates itself continually. The opportunity is continually in front of you, and it's a matter of whether you're going to harness it and whether you're going to capture it today. But if you don't do it today, you can do it tomorrow. And you probably should have done it yesterday, but it's okay because you can do it now. And this is a big kind of piece that we dive into the new book, into Human Being Human, is about taking time and looking at it like an hourglass and giving us the ability to tip time. And what this does is gives us a really unique ability to visualize separating the past and the future. And by zooming in on those grains of sand, I think like when we look at it from the 50,000 foot view, an hourglass looks like a stream. And in a stream, everything's connected, right? The water molecules connect to each other. They bind to each other. But in an hourglass, they're just grains of sand. And to realize that these grains of sand, all they're doing is touching. They're
Yeah.
not connected, that your past and your future are completely disconnected, but it's our psychological piece that gives us this mindset that we're supposed to connect them together, and we're supposed to wait for the right timing, and we're supposed to, oh, well, it always happens for me this way. And we create patterns out of that chaos. But if we can understand that the chaos is something you can get away from by just living right in the neck of the hourglass, in that quiet part of the hourglass,
Yeah. The eye
this
of the
is,
storm.
yeah, this is what allows us to harness opportunity and make significant shift and get us away from that reliance on, right, this illusory grasp of trying to live a life that we actually don't want, but we're pursuing.
Yeah. So I want to bring you back because I want to expand on something.
Yeah.
So you made 2 points that I think at surface level, I think I might be missing something, because at
Sure.
surface level, to me, at least how I heard it, it seems somewhat contradictory. So
Cool.
you were talking about how the whole everything happens for a reason, right? And how people may use that to kind of breed complacency, like things are just going to happen, right? We're getting in the backseat of the Uber as opposed to, taking the driver's seat.
Sure.
But then we also talked about opportunity passing and seeing it as that moment of just, oh, well, if I don't do it right now, I'm going to lose it. And the concept of, oh, well, no, I can actually just do it tomorrow. So I think, to me, both of those say similar things, but one is, I don't want to use right and wrong, but like one is what we want, one isn't in this conversation. So can you unpack those two and how they play together? Because
yeah, for sure.
do you see, am I bridging that properly? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. I think like the thing about living in this, well, let's call it the, the neck of the hourglass, living in this state of calm and contentment, realizing that we're not where we necessarily need to be, but you are where you are.
Yeah.
If we can really embrace that, and it's a big mindset shift from what we've been taught in the past. There's nobody on Etsy selling slogans that say you're exactly where you are. Nobody's going to put that on their wall because it's not motivational and it's not inspiring and it's not going to look good with, daisies and roses on it.
Yeah.
But by understanding that you're just where you are today, and if you can separate the past and the future and realize that this present moment where nothing actually is happening, right? Between like the 2 snaps of a finger, nothing happened, but that's where everything has the potential to occur. That's the only place that action can happen, right? We can't do things in the past. We can't do things in the future. So really getting comfortable in that moment of quiet, of living where we are and understanding that this is just where you are. Where opportunity comes in is that other, I think, false reality that we believe that opportunity is fleeting, that opportunity comes, oh, I missed my shot, right? But you didn't miss your shot because it continually recreates itself. So we don't need to give up when we go, oh, I missed the opportunity, find a new opportunity. And if we can live in that state to go, I know I'm exactly where I am today, and I know that I can harness anything that I want to and change that in my life today or tomorrow or the next day, it gets us away from the pressure of having to achieve things in this kind of hero culture mentality where we go, I've got to go be great. I've, the difference between resilience and courage. And I've heard so many motivational speakers and coaches, and they talk about the importance and value of courage. But courage, I think, from my lens at least, is the wrong word. We should be talking about resilience instead of courage. And courage is necessary. Courage is valuable. Courage is, taking the step in that moment, jumping off the cliff, making the decision. But if we rely solely on courage, then we don't have the ability or the power that resilience gives us, right? Resilience is what we utilize and what we can draw upon when we're out of courage, right? When we've lost the strength to make the leap or make the
Yeah.
decision. Resilience is that thing that continues to push you forward.
Kind of
And
like discipline versus motivation.
yeah,
Could be a similar
I think
relationship.
it's a great analogy or a great parallel.
Yeah. So to tie a bow on it, to go back to
Yeah.
the opportunity and the things happen for a reason. So I guess if we look at it in both ways, I guess first of all, it's perspective. And again, like I guess the meaning that we're attaching to it. But how I'm hearing it is, if we look at opportunity as fleeting or as passing, and then we take that victim mindset of, oh, well, I missed my opportunity, that also then breeds the same complacency as everything happens for a reason. I don't need to
100%.
do anything. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay. So you leave corporate,
Yeah.
you take a massive leap.
Right.
You're the primary breadwinner. You have 2 young children. You have a big mortgage. Like,
Yeah.
walk me through. Obviously, you're in the financial game, so I'm sure you were smart with your money. But like, regardless of how smart with your money you are, like that's a lot of necessity to
Yeah.
generate. Talk me through like your mindset around that transition and as you went through it.
Yeah. It was like it probably is the scariest thing I've done.
Yeah.
Especially at this stage of life. But I think the amazing thing was starting to meet other people who were on the same journey and on the same path.
Yeah.
The people who were stuck or who had placed themselves, were not stuck, probably the wrong word. The people who had placed themselves in a position where that requirement to stay in a very good paying job, and not exercise the creative freedom that they have, and to not leverage that. The number of people that I started to meet around the world who thought the same way that I did, yet I thought I was the only dude who felt that way.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing that supported me continuing to make that shift. It was, meeting people like Luke Askew, who I know, who out of the UK, meeting Randy, all of these conversations to help reinforce that it was the right decision to make. That's what has helped carry me through. I thought initially I would, leave one gig and then go find the same job, but with a company with a different logo. That's the standard practice that we take. But to realize that would have put me back in the spot where I didn't have the ability to prioritize my family. I didn't have the ability to prioritize my children. Moving to this small town, right? We moved out of Vancouver, BC, and then we made this move to a town of 1,400 people. And to see the quality of life, like we live on a street, there's 53 kids on this street. And they come home when the sun goes down, well, then the kids come home. And I'll randomly have, 7 different children in my basement, and they're all playing together. And those are right. That's what we fight so hard for. That's why we work the extra hours. That's why we put in the overtime. But what we have to realize is that thing that we are pursuing is the thing that we're giving up. Right. So we're working so hard to achieve this life where we can be with our children and we can be with our loved ones and we can live this life of calm contentment.
Yeah.
But we get caught up in it and we end up missing out on all of those experiences. And to go, tomorrow's not guaranteed. I think, we have this mindset that we're going to live forever and retire at 65 and, then live to 110.
That seems wild to me. Like the entitlement people have nowadays to tomorrow.
Right.
And just to unpack that for people a little bit, like Dude, as we're recording this, well, this will go live on Monday, so it'll be
Yeah.
like 3 days from recording it.
Yeah.
I think it was last week, 30-year-old bodybuilder passed away.
Mhm.
Like, people, there's no urgency.
No.
I can't understand it. I don't understand why people act and behave as if tomorrow's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Just don't get it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I had to underline that because hopefully that sinks in for someone and they realize, like, fuck, dude,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
And
I had a buddy, his name was Howard Daniels,
yeah,
and he wrote the closing chapter to my first book, To Stop Stalling, Start Selling. As I was in the writing process last March, he called me and let me know that he had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. He had a year to live if he was lucky, and it was probably somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And I didn't know, like, how do you unpack that, right? How do you honor an incredible man? He lived, like, his life was very parallel. So he was we actually had the same title in the last company. So we had the same job. He had a wife who stayed home. He had young children.
mhm.
And all of a sudden his world shifted. And I said, well, would you write the last chapter of my book? And he's like, absolutely. I'm like, this is the only way I know how to honor you. This is the way that I can make your message carry on. And he wrote a chapter and didn't say a single thing about cancer. Didn't say anything about woe is me. It was just go out and get it. But it wasn't the sob story, right? He had full artistic license to write whatever he wanted to write. I'm like just write me a chapter. And he passed away at the start of this year. And to realize that impacted, like, to flip through my book now and to see his words and to go, he doesn't get tomorrow, but we get tomorrow. We have the opportunity to do it. Right. I think, what was that? There's a big, the marketing stat that goes around about the chance of you being born, right? 1 in
30
a
trillion.
gajillion,
Yeah.
trillion, gazillion. But that doesn't bring reality to the situation, right? Until you do that. 2 months after that, had another buddy pass from cancer. And you're like, dude, just go get it. Like, go do it today, because we don't need, once we can separate ourselves from this requirement to be using chaos and crisis as the catalyst for change in our lives, when you realize that I refer to it as the power of nothing, that the power of living in this moment of nothing, that's the thing that unlocks your ability to achieve anything. And it's funny because, it's been great to start 3 companies in a year and a half. And I get the comments from other people going like, holy, I can't, how do I even start to think about keeping up with the pace that you're on? And I feel like I'm still, like, there's so much further, there's so much more that we're going to do. And like these, I think, you and I talked about running a for-purpose business.
Yeah.
And to shift the mindset. And this is, our objective with Everyday Human is to raise $10 million for charity.
Mhm.
It's going to be amazing. And I'm really excited for the day that we can take the 10 and turn it into 50, and take the 50 and turn it into 100, and make that impact to help change other people's lives, because all you've got to do is do it.
Mhm.
Right? There's a cartoon that says, who wants change? And everybody puts their hands up. And then you're like, well, who wants to change? And
Yeah.
nobody raises their hand.
Yeah.
And why? And that, like that, it frustrates me. But that's what I've spent my last year and a half thinking about. And that's what Human Being Human is all about, is unpacking that and putting it in digestible steps to help other people understand that they can do it in their own lives. And it's not like, go achieve your dreams, right? It's just go do it. You don't have to be the hero.
Yeah.
Just live in this moment of calm and get to a point where you can accept yourself. And if we can live in that life, like you take Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, or you take, Tony Robbins has this big pyramid of how to be a wonderful human. So the self-actualization and making impact in the world and all of this other stuff is not necessary to be human. The only things that we need, to live in our modern society as a human, being free from the threat of physical danger and having our physiological needs taken care of, right? Having a roof over your head, having food in your fridge in our modern day society are kind of table stakes. But the peak to me of this, I call it the sacred hierarchy. The peak of the pyramid is just self-acceptance, and not to be mistaken with complacency, because it's not, I'm definitely not sitting back and letting the world pass me by. I'm grabbing it, grabbing it by the horns and going for it.
The underlying piece for most of the things that I'm hearing you say is some sort of awareness. And I'm curious how you build it. So let me add some context to that question. I think you think about the urgency, you think about potential loss, you think about all these things, and it brings an awareness to take advantage of opportunity while you have it and not act like it will be guaranteed tomorrow, bringing us back to the opportunity conversation from earlier. But at the end of the day, there is only 24 hours. So like these were conversations that I was having with myself, and these were my thoughts. I lost my dog about a month ago.
Right.
And it had me thinking about a lot of these things, right?
Yeah.
And like things become real, no matter who you lost, whether it's a loved one, a pet, like it doesn't really matter. And it got me thinking about, oh wow, like, man, maybe I just start saying yes more.
Yeah.
Maybe I start doing more, even when I don't want to, because those memories may be valuable someday.
Yeah.
But you can't say yes to everything, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, like, as you build that awareness, how do you then filter? And
Cool.
eventually, I mean, the self-acceptance, that's a different conversation, I think, but like that's where I'm super curious.
Yeah, I think, what I refer to it in the coaching business and what I do, it's one of the first exercises that I do with clients, is about determining what we call their sacred line. And the sacred line lives above your mission, your vision, your origin story. It lives above you as a worker bee, but it's what we define it as the 15 words that define who you are as a human. What do you stand for, right? What's the difference? When I called this company Sacred Line, even my mom was like, oh, Derek, that's a big word, right? Like sacred's not a word that you play around with, but it's so important to understand the difference between what's sacred and what's important. And very few people, if any, the slightest percentage of people actually understand what they stand for.
Yeah.
Right? What's the hill that you're willing to die on? And this sacred line is the 15 words that represent you as a human. So when Mike walks into a room and the song starts playing, what are the words of the chorus? What are those 15 words or less that define you as a human? For me, my 14 words are ruthlessly resilient, humble and honest, living instead of merely existing, and evangelizing the human journey. And to me, those are the 14 words that I live by. And every decision that I make it has to go through that check. And it has to satisfy living by those statements. Because
Yeah.
if everything that I do aligns with what I stand for as a human, then I'm making the right choice, right? Starting Polar Cold Caps up here in Canada. It's a product that helps usually women, but men and women, it helps patients keep their hair as they're going through chemo. It's a product that I fell in love with. And one of the other gals who did her TEDx in January with me, Kelsey Kerrigan, she talked about cold caps, and I'd never heard of them before.
Yeah.
And Kelsey had raised some money so that she can loan out these cold caps to other women as they're going through treatment. You know, US dollars, about 1,500 Canadian, about $2,000 for this product. So she raised money and she said, well, I'm going to donate, you know, she raised enough money to have 3 of them. And I'm like, well, dude, 3's not enough. I'm going to buy you 3. We ended up buying 5. Then I called a buddy who lives further up north. He's a guy who I connected Randy to. And I'm like, dude, I need you to help me with this. And he's like, well, 5's not very many. I'll buy 5. So then we went from having 3 caps to 13 that we now donate to families as they're going through their cancer journey.
Yeah.
I fell in love with this company, and we're now starting the Canadian division of the existing US firm. And it's an incredible company. Just the logistics make sense to have a Canadian division of this company. I would not have started that company if it didn't align with my 15 words, or for me, my 14, because it fits into that mandate. So, you know, I think it's the Jim Carrey movie, the Yes Man, right?
Yep.
Brilliant movie, but you've got to say yes to the things that align with what you stand for as a human, because I'm not going to make a decision in my business moving forward, or in any of the businesses moving forward, that don't align with those 15 words. And that's what helps keep me centered and help keep me on track.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember we were talking about this the other day. It's kind of like people say like absolute truths or core
Right.
values. I don't think those are the same. I had a good conversation with my buddy Cole Hatter about that on, I forget what episode, but it's like having those guiding principles, right? Like if it doesn't check these boxes, we don't do it.
Right.
Which I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we switch gears, because I could
Sure.
talk about this stuff all day, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we can highlight the new project. So
Yeah.
obviously, you know, you've built 3 companies in the last year and a half. You've done very well for yourself. You've had a great TEDx, which we'll link below. I highly recommend everybody watches it. You've had a #1 international bestseller with your first book. Now you have a new book that just came out yesterday as we are recording this. So we'll link all that up in the show notes as well, so people can go grab copies. Tell us about the new book, the new project. And then I want to make sure we do that justice before we start to wrap up here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. You know, I think I said earlier about the hill that you're willing to die on. And, you know, this is my statement. The first book was fun. Stop Stalling, Start Selling. It's great. It's got really good sales tips in it. It's a nice motivational book. But the subtitle of that book is, you don't need to read this book, but you should. Right? We open that book with, if you want to know the secret sauce to sales, is go sell something. That's it. That's all you need to know about sales, is go sell it. So fun, campy, great lessons. Super proud of that book, but this is really a significant shift to make a statement about where we are in this hero culture lifestyle, about talking about the value of just being yourself, of being able to, we explain in there that, you know, go deeper on the concept of tipping time and the power of nothing, and then how the sacred hierarchy aligns in that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most meaningful things is I have 10 other amazing humans from around the world that have contributed chapters to this book. They are all people who I've met in the last year and a half. Randy is one of them. I was like the day before going to publishing, and I had a great meeting with Randy. I'm like, dude, I need your chapter on Go Big to Give Big. It needs to be in the book. You know, having Lorna Wilkins from the UK who talks about that millennial challenge, right? Giselle Sadi from Toronto, Canada, who talks about that high performance culture, having Sandra Cruzet, who from Switzerland, she talks about being the chief heart officer. And it's, it's the big missing role in the C-suite with the companies, and it's not HR, it's being the chief heart officer. Having Ben Burdett from the US and his conversation about his experience in the Air Force, and the pressures that come along with being the guy who has your finger on the red button, right? And you make the decision about who lives and who doesn't. This contribution of just exploring the human experience. Kai Scott, who dives into a conversation about gender and understanding that to help break that down. I've learned more from Kai about gender identity than I did in any of our DE&I training in the corporate world. So this project is an amalgamation of conversations about being human and about how do we get away, how do we live a life of contentment when we compare the number one thing that people say on their deathbed is, I wish I would have lived a life more true to myself, rather than trying to be something that I wasn't. And how do we get there? How do we handle the baby boomer transition of, individuals in their late 60s and 70s who are still working 60 hours a week because they don't know what they'd do if they weren't at work? Addressing the challenge that their kids don't want to buy their companies. But they also feel an incredible amount of guilt associated with that because they enjoyed the boat and they enjoyed the cottage while mom and dad were working on the weekend to make a successful life.
Yeah.
And then dad retires and is dead within 2 years. We don't need that life anymore, right? We've passed the phase where physical capital is the key. It's the mental capital. It's the intelligence that we need to rely on to be able to create a life of abundance. So there are so many things wrapped up into this book, and to go on a journey. I think, the people who have pre-read it for me, they're like, Derek, I felt like you were in my living room just having a chat with me. And it's easy digestible. It's a beautiful compilation of stories from people around the world, and then really does have that practical piece of how to unlock living a life of calm and living a life of contentment. And where do we go from here? There is no conclusion in the book. The conclusion's just called continuation, because it's a conversation we need to keep having more and more. But yeah, I'm super honest. Like, I'm so proud of it. The main primary text of this, I actually wrote the book in 5 days. It was February 4th to the 9th. And I just sat down for 5 days and I wrote. And it was an incredible experience to actually, there was editing and formatting and everything after, which is why it's coming out now. But the primary text of the book I wrote in 5 days, and it was just this immersive process that I went through and just knocked it off. And I think that's the thing that creates the flow out of all of the random pieces that make up the story and make up the book.
So cool. Best place to grab it, is it Amazon?
Yeah, go to Amazon, just search my name. So if you go to Amazon, put Derek Strokon in there, both books will pop up. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoys them both. But yeah, it's such a beautiful statement of where I'm going and what I'm going to be working on in the future.
I love that. I love that. Well, guys, those will both be linked in the show notes. Grab copies, show some love. Derek, where do you hang out most on social? Website, social media? Where can people follow along with your journey? Reach out if they have questions, plug away.
Perfect. So probably easiest place is derekstrokon.com. We'll always link to where I'm going or what I'm working on. So right now it links to my Sacred Line, to my coaching and consulting business. It may end up linking to Everyday Human, which is one of the other new projects. It may link to polarcoldcaps.ca. but derekstrokon.com, that's the best way to kind of track where I'm at. And then LinkedIn is probably my most active social profile. I find that the relationships and conversations there are pretty amazing. It's introduced me to some wonderful people in the last year and a half. So
perfect. Once again, everything will be linked up. Guys, get connected, show some love. You know what to do. Derek, last question I have for you.
Yeah.
Going all the way back.
Okay.
Starting in corporate, having this great climb, pretty much checking every box, all these different roles in your 16 years there. And then hitting this point where you're like, you know what, I want to spend more time with my kids, and having that disagreement on scheduling and structure, calendar, and these types of things, and taking the leap and building that first company, right? Last January. And then now up until this point have grown that really well. And you're 2 other companies deep, a #1 international bestseller, a TEDx talk, and now a brand new book that's already ranking very well on Amazon, just 24 hours in. This entire window.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact on your life and in your business?
A great question. I've learned to believe in myself again in the last year and a half. I think I gave up a huge part of that. Doing what I was told to do and doing what was expected of me. And to think back of, as a kid, my entrepreneurial spirit, like it goes back to selling lemonade in the backyard to golfers as they came by the golf course, selling oranges, working in restaurants, whoever could sell the most steaks, that entrepreneurial sales guy that lived in me as a kid, he got muted. And learning in the last year and a half to believe in myself again. And I take full accountability. This is not something someone else did to me. This is something I allowed to have happen to myself, but to realize the power I have of just being me. There's a great, I don't want to ruin the TEDx, but it's the part that I'm talking about with my son at the end of the book, or at the end of the TEDx.
Yeah.
And to just live your life being yourself. And it sounds cliche, but when you wrap it in and understand that the power to shift and the power to change is really just mechanical. There's an order that we can follow to understand this that unlocks this ability for us to shift. But the biggest thing for me in the last year and a half has been trusting myself, trusting the process, and just believing in me again. It's been amazing.
Boom. There it is. Derek, thanks for joining me, brother. I really enjoyed this.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so much, dude.
100%.